Hello guys, and welcome to a new warning order video today by me, Vulcan. Today I wanted to talk about the information we've been given about WARNO over the past few weeks, including a look at the latest dev blog about maps. You can find links to all 3 dev blogs I'll be looking at today in the description. Starting with the blog on the 31st of December last year, this one talked about the graphical update to the game since Steel Division 2, and also some information about the Iris Zoom engine. For anyone unfamiliar, the Iris Zoom engine is Eugen's own baby that they built from scratch and have been using to make their games since Ruse, which came out in 2010. It has come a long way since then, over the 12 years, hosting the Wargame series, Active Aggression, and, of course, the Steel Division games. But diving deeper, the first part of the blog talks about the introduction of physically based rendering. I actually learned about this on my uni degree back in the day, but basically, physically based rendering is often used to achieve photorealism by modeling the flow of light in real time, like in the real world. You can see this being demonstrated in the second and third GIF with the sun cycle and weather being changed. It looks absolutely awesome. There is also mention of upgrades to their textures, models and skins, as well as an update to the infantry, which is great to hear. In Steel Division 2 and older games, some of the infantry models were a little bit goofy close up, as some of you might remember, so it sounds like they'll make them a bit better this time around. At the end of this part, there is a little reminder that WARNO intends to have the same minimum specifications as Steel Division 2, so if you can already run that, then don't worry about being able to play WARNO 2. On to the second part. Damage and destruction. There has always been bits and pieces flying around when a unit gets shot in Steel Division 2. But now, damage actually affects the unit model. In the first GIF, you can see the different parts of the mudguards and side skirts being shot off the Abrams as it takes damage, which is such a cool feature. Tanks and vehicles can even be properly ammo racked with their turret going flying, which you can see in the GIF. Parts of helicopters and planes can also be shot off when they are damaged or shot down too. And wrecks have also had an update, which just adds even more to the eye candy when zooming in to inspect the carnage. Overall though, this post was just a preview of how amazing this game is going to look, but let's move on to the next dev blog. This one is all about the setting, and hints at exactly what the campaigns will be about. It looks like the story explored in WARNO will be alternate history, of course, based on real events during the Cold War with a different future. Wargame actually explored campaigns in the same way, but the detail here really seems spot on. So if you're interested, make sure to have a read through the first part to get an idea of what a Cold War gone hot scenario would really sound like. The next part talks about the setting, which will be focused on central Germany and specifically the Fulda Gap to begin with. This was one of the most fortified areas during the Cold War, and games come back to it time and time again. Apparently, the forces here on the NATO side were referred to as Centag, and this includes the US and West German forces. On the Soviet side, they have the Western Group of Forces, which is a culmination of Soviet and East German troops. These are what we'll see in the first 4 campaigns, but it is stated that we will see other forces represented in multiplayer battle groups, such as the French and British. Finally, they sum up what you can actually expect in the final game at the end of early access. There will be 4 Army General campaigns available for solo, co-op, or versus play, several scripted scenarios, which actually sounds familiar to historical missions in Steel Division 2, except improved. 6 nations will be playable in multiplayer, which covers 16 historical battle groups, made up of over 600 units. And that's just on final release 2, because as we move further down, it's actually mentioned that both North Ag, which consists of mostly British and Polish forces, and South Ag, which consists of mostly French and Czechoslovakian units, would also be covered in their own Army General campaigns as DLC. How crazy is that? It's going to be epic for sure. And we aren't even done yet. Let's move on to the latest dev blog. This one is all about maps, something that I think we could all agree could have been a bit more abundant during the life cycle of Steel Division 2. There were loads on release, but only 4 came out over the following 2 years. However, looks like this time things are going to be different, as this blog discusses how they are making and designing maps from here on. Of course, they want better maps than ever before, and to do that, they started with a similar approach to that in Steel Division 2. In Steel Division 2, they relied on maps and photographs from the time to try and faithfully recreate the battles of old. This time, though, they have satellite imagery. As you can imagine, this is much more accurate, and their engine uses digital elevation models. What this means is that they can recreate the terrain you would see in real life using the satellite data, making maps more realistic than ever. With the topography in place, they can add all of the details that would make it look believable. These include their fields, forests, towns, and industry. And I'd recommend going to the development blog and having a good look yourselves and a good read, because there is tons of love going into this. My favourite part is really the attention to detail when you're zoomed in. The way it just shows how everything has been abandoned, how it would have been if families were quickly displaced from their homes. Like, all of the extra models that have been developed to create these scenes is actually incredible and only adds to how beautiful it's going to look. I just want to add, it's really hard to appreciate how much work goes into this kind of thing. Like, having studied computer games technology at university, I look at this and I just go, wow, because in my mind, this is something that would take a very long time to do. And I know that they've been working on the game for a long time. So just hats off to them for how fantastic this is looking so far. With that all said, we still aren't done. How can I not point out the words map editor? Yes, it's confirmed. There will be a map editor for WARNO. Whether or not the community gets their hands on it remains to be seen, but regardless, it means that the creative process of creating a map will be significantly shorter than in previous games, keeping things much more fresh as the life cycle of WARNO continues. And that is something to be excited about. When I first saw it, I was ecstatic. Finally, I mentioned about the first WARNO tournament. It will be starting on the 22nd of January. And yes, I will be covering it on the channel. So absolutely tons to look forward to. So if you weren't hyped before, you better be now. WARNO is out on the 20th. And I, amongst others, cannot wait for that day. Probably not the right way to put it, but that's all. And once again, find a link to all of the development blogs I've covered linked in the description. I do try to sum up and keep things concise, but if you feel like you've missed anything, do make sure to go and give them a read, especially the part about the story behind WARNO, but there's loads of cool details in there. And I'd even go so far as to recommend to click on the pictures in the dev blogs and take a closer look. Maybe even download them for wallpapers. Either way, make sure to subscribe to get your future dose of WARNO. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.